We had last time arrived at the point where the psychic entity puts forward a personality. The psychic principle grows slowly across the births from a spark into a flame, and when it becomes an entity by itself, strong enough to put forward a personality, what you call soul personality, what you may call the psychic being, which supports the inner mental, the inner vital, and the subtle physical Purusha from behind. And it is this psychic personality, which you may also call the psychic being, that is turned towards nature, draws the stream of experience and grows. It is intended not only to draw but also to emanate, project the divine influence on the instrumental nature. And this psychic entity and its personality is situated not in what is normally called in yogic parlance the heart center. The heart center, what is called the anahata, the center of the unstruck sound in the tantras and in the yogic terminology, is the emotional center. So the yogic heart center is the center of emotions, and the psychic center is behind, still behind this emotional center. This leads to possible confusions and wrong identification of the psychic with the emotional being. Very often, when there is an emotional experience, an experience of a bhakta, for instance, of a devotee, one is apt to feel that it is a psychic experience, but it is not. An emotional movement, like weeping, for instance, what is called spiritual weeping, it is never under control. It goes outside the control. There is a movement of agitation. But the psychic movement, the psychic tears, the psychic weeping, if you can call it, is always in control. There is no agitation. There is always a sense of tranquility and purity. The psychic tears have a result of purification. Now why? Why does the psychic have to shed tears? One is the psychic is always aware of its source in the divine. Always it feels that it is a child, and it is a movement of the child towards its parent, which may express itself in a deep movement of consciousness, shedding of tears. But the second possible cause is what Sri Aurobindo calls psychic sadness. Now the psychic sadness is different from what is called the pain of separation, abhiman, where you cry because the beloved delays his revelation. You feel dry and you cry out. Now that is an emotional experience in Bhakti Yoga. But when the psychic sadness is when the instrumental nature continues to follow its stupid little round of existence even after the awakening has taken place. One knows that one has a spiritual purpose, a spiritual destiny, and one aspires, one puts in an effort. But after a while, for whatever reason, possibly due to the pulls of the lower faculties, senses, shadow of the unconscious and the inconscient, your aspiration flags, and you turn back to the little creature comforts, little vital movements of the external being. It is then that the psychic feels a certain sadness, because it is unable to influence the instrumental nature. An unaccountable sadness without any apparent external reason, that is the psychic sadness. It doesn't happen and doesn't need to happen in every case. But I mention this in order to present these possibilities: the psychic weeping, the psychic sadness, which are altogether on a different plane of experience than the emotional. It is easy to mistake an emotionally deep experience for the psychic. But a psychic experience is not that easy. It is not enough that the psychic is awake. It has to be active. It has to surge forward. There are many stages. But the emotional one is within the reach of most of us who have devotion, who have some at least beginnings of love for the divine. Once we know that the psychic being is there behind the emotional center, in the center of the chest, the spiritual heart, in certain traditions, is said to be a little to the right. But the psychic center is deep within, in the center of the chest. And that is likened to a cave, a secret cave. When you try to become aware of the psychic being, or to call it in the normal parlance, the soul, you have the experience of either you go step by step and the passage gets narrower. That is why the imagery of a cave cave is given. Deep within, Hrid Guha, the cave of the heart. And there the Upanishad describes it is a flame no larger than the thumb of a man. This shall not be taken to be an arithmetical exactitude. It is to give an idea of the diminutive size of the inner psychic being. It's not always that it is of that size. Some may experience it as a flame. Some may experience it as a miniature form of themselves. I would see a miniature passport size photo of myself, very small. Sri Aurobindo describes when Savitri went in search of her soul, how she saw her divine counterpart there in the midst of the cave, and the human Savitri and the divine Savitri joined together. So the truth is, it can reveal itself in any form. In our yoga, the common experience of the psychic birth, as it is called, birth means formation. It is always there, whether we are aware of it or not. But in a concrete, sensible manner, it is seen as a child, a newborn child. The psychic birth is experienced something like a newborn child. It is not enough. It is only the first step to awake to the presence of the psychic. It has to be activized. To bring it to the front is the next step. How do we activize it? It is by the cultivation of qualities, of movements, which have a kinship with the innate character of the psychic. The psychic exudes sweetness, joy, a flow for beauty, and a sense of purity. We have to cultivate these qualities, encourage these movements in our daily life, whether it is in the mind or in the emotional being or in the vital or in the physical. In short, to build a climate, as I have often said, a climate of the psychic which will draw, invite the psychic being to cast its influence, cast its rays on the surface being from its station in the subliminal. There are many exciting causes for such psychic movements. If we are not always obsessed with our ego, with our sense of importance, but are natural, we have a certain spiritual humility, which is a very rare thing, then the sight or the appearance of a scenery of beauty, of a beauty of form, maybe of a child, maybe of an animal, maybe of a flower, maybe even of a human, the adult human being. If you don't stop on the surface, but let your gaze go deeper, you touch that aspect which awakens the psychic response. Usually, the personal element has got to be absent. When we look at things from a personal point of view, we always refer to our needs, to our desires, to our expectations. But supposing you stand in the beach and see the sunrise, or see the sun, the moonrise, it is an impersonal experience. So it is always a part of sadhana when one wants to activize the psychic being, to devote some part of the effort to familiarize oneself with the vibrations of the psychic. You see things, beautiful things. You read beautiful things that awaken love, that awaken warmth, that awaken benevolence, kindness. You see, even on the TV, now that the TV is so common, certain serials which carry a meaning and a significance. And they have a purifying effect. And the psychic response. These are all various tricks, if I may say so, of cajoling the psychic to play a part in our daily life. The natural feeling of the psychic is one of being a child. You feel a child not only of God, but of all. That is why you see many saints, they call everyone father. It is not behavior of pattern, but a spontaneous feeling of being a child. That cuts through many of the conventional relationships. And the working attitude is one of surrender. So if we practice surrender in our daily life, surrender of our will to the higher will, of our desire to the higher will, surrender ourselves to the divine. That evokes a ready response from the psychic center. And we are, the psychic and we on the surface are taken up in one moment of surrender. Similarly, love. Love, when it is not self-regarding, when it does not refer to myself, when there is no element of expectation, in other words, when it is not the common human love, but answers to the true definition of love as a spontaneous, self-giving. Love is nothing else but self-giving. You give yourself, maybe to a human being, maybe to a deity, maybe to the Supreme Divine. Whatever it is, the moment is the same. Self-giving. This creates a suction, as it were, for the fount of love, which is the psychic, to exert itself. And psychic love, which is the strongest bond between the human and the divine, comes to be forged. So we spoke of surrender, spoke of love, and then purity. Mother attached great importance to purity. It goes without saying that purity is not the usual ritualistic purity of taking bath 10 times and wearing wet clothes and that sort of thing. But it is a psychological purity, psychological cleanliness. No ugly thoughts, no false movements in the mind and thought, no turbid and mixed emotions, no possessive, aggrandizing impulses on the vital, and no sticking to past habits of inertia, ugliness on the part of the physical. This is purity. Purity, to use Sri Aurobindo's definition, is to accept no other influence except the divine. Maybe we are far away from fulfilling that demand, but every one of us can be on the way. That is to take care not to open to anything which we feel to be impure, conflicting with what we seek, contrary to what the divine wants us to be and to feel and think. That is purity. And if the psychic is awake, we always have a barometer where we indulge in a movement contrary to purity. We always have an uneasiness, a strange uneasiness you feel. You feel a jar. There is what Sri Aurobindo calls the psychic gets offended. An awakened psychic gets offended at the least sign of impurity. of arrogance, of egoism, of brutality. These are all unpsychic elements which push back the psychic being. These are some of the ingredients of the discipline, not only to awaken, but to develop the psychic element in our life. This personal contribution on the part of each sadhak enables the psychic personality to grow in strength. It is something like feeding the psychic personality, the psychic being. And as it gets strong, it constantly draws strength from its source, the psychic entity. And as it gets strong, the psychic entity puts forward its influence through the psychic personality on the surface being. So it is in our hands to clear the passage for the psychic action, to make our life an open field for the stepping of the psychic beings. When, as a result of this culture, tapasya, to realize the psychic, develops, and a link is established between our surface being and the psychic. That link is gradually developed by close attention, by more and more expanding surrender. And when the link is firm, there is a kind of union between the surface being and the psychic part. You have the beginnings of a saint, sant. A sant may not have knowledge, may not have erudition, may not have physical siddhis, but here in the central part, he has achieved union with the psychic being, which is the divine inhabitant in his body. And thereafter for him there is no friction, no resistance. He has no enemies. There is no separativity. Everywhere he feels the same divine. You have the saint. Now that is not the end of it. To blossom into a saint is not the entire purpose of this yoga. It is a fulfillment of a kind which helps other fulfillments. When you have an uninterrupted union with the psychic center, the next step, it is called psychic realization. You realize the psychic being, which is a concentration of divine consciousness in yourself. Thereafter, the next step, more difficult, is what is called psychicization. Psychicization is a subject by itself, and I think we had better reserve it for our next session.